Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and give this video a like.
Podcast below in the description. I need you to subscribe to that as well.
Also, check out our friends at wineaccess.com/ham. 20% off the best bottles in the world. Send a gift.
20% off. Send a gift right now. 20% off wineaccess.com/ham. Do it.
So the news that the Niners canceled OTAs may or may not be related Tuesday to the news that came out on Tuesday morning from Monday's OTA practice, which was not good. Justin Skule, ACL injury, and Tarvarius Moore, Achilles injury. You know, we already had the Jeff Wilson injury as well. So two pretty major injuries to 49ers on Tuesday. Not necessarily to targeted starters, but Tarvarius Moore plays a lot, maybe could have as a safety. And obviously Justin Skule played a lot last year, played some guard, played some tackle. Depth taking a major hit. Actually, I was looking back at it. Unofficial count, somebody can correct me, but just at a quick view, I think there were only a handful of players that the Niners had available and active for every game last year. I think Tarvarius Moore, Fred Warner, Marcel Harris, Eric Armstead, Azeez Al-Shire. I think that's the list, but again, that was a quick glance here before we started.
Yeah, I mean, Skule definitely started that. If you remember the Super Bowl year when McGlinchey and Joe Staley both went down for several games as a rookie. Now, I saw a lot of people saying he was no lock to make the roster. I understand that. And just like Tarvarius Moore, you're not losing Ed Reed in his prime. But the overall arching point is it was rattling to any single human being just in the league, let alone if you follow this team, to know this team has the market cornered on injuries. That's not even debatable. It's literally they've done the studies the last couple of years. They had more injuries last year than any team. The year before, they made the Super Bowl. Tackles were dropping like flies. Guys were it was crazy. It was nuts. And then their quarterback, who the healthiest year he had was 19, gets hurt all the time. So they just have guys that drop like flies. And to me, just to read that headline of maybe they sent out a press release too, but I saw it first on Twitter, an ACL and Achilles injury at an OTA practice, and I'm with whoever the commenter was, and I understand people say people get hurt. People get hurt playing football. People get hurt doing physical activity. It's just part of life, let alone football. In the offseason, I would say the two go-to injuries are you're not going to tear shoulders, right? You're not going to have labrum tears because you're not tackling. You're going to have Achilles and you're going to have ACLs. That is not abnormal. Hell, the Niners, it happened once upon a time to Crabtree. Remember, that was probably the most eye-opening Achilles in an offseason. I remember in Philadelphia, Jeremy Maclin tore his Achilles, like it's stop and start stuff. But to have two of them, they are devastating injuries. Not that they are career-altering, but that they knock guys out for the season.
And they can be career-altering.
And they can be, but just like these guys, these are two players. One for sure would have made the roster. The other more than likely would have. They're just on injury reserve. That are just gone in a practice for a team that, like, listen, they've admitted it. Like I said before, I don't pretend, no one does, to understand like strength conditioning doctors, how it really impacts this. But like a couple years ago, they fired everybody. Like they admitted it, like they had a problem. It's not even an opinion.
They didn't even know exactly what the problem was. All you have sometimes is the end result data. How do you get there can be very unique, injury to injury, body to body. Every body is different. But yes, they clearly were at a desperate spot a couple years ago when they changed staffs. Because that's a thing you do out of desperate. Like, what else can we do?
But what else can you do, right? If your offensive line's playing shitty, you just go, we need a different coach. When you have guys just tearing ACLs, you can go, we need new doctors. Well, yeah, Stanford, your doctors are from Stanford. We need new trainers. Well, your trainers were there for Super Bowls, right? I mean, you're in NFC championships under Harbaugh. We need a new strength coach. Well, okay, but is that really the problem?
We need new turf, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the conversation last year after a couple guys got hurt, after Solomon Thomas and Nick Bosa got hurt in New York, right? It's their turf. It's their turf.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, the Niners were adamant. I don't blame them. I mean, that was a.
I heard from a turf expert that turf is bad,
but it didn't feel like it. Guys kept going down throughout the season, right? Now Saquon. I mean,
Saquon's injury was a little different. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not like guys on other teams don't get ACLs and Achilles. Part of it is specifically if that news came out for a team that hadn't been dealing with what feels like a very significant injury bug now for several years and multiple training staffs, it would not be the same piece of news, right?
Yeah.
But I think part of it is like, okay, what's next? How many years can you be injury prone before it's not just bad luck? Because the Niners, like you said a couple years ago, clearly said, well, maybe it's bad luck. Maybe we don't really know, but we got to change something. So
well, for example, I know they've told a lot of people, obviously in our email that we got this was a planned deal. And listen, I haven't asked anyone. I'm not a journalist. I'm not really trying to find the truth. I just know my gut says this was when you have two major injuries in an OTA and you had to assume, unless they were in the weight room, let's just say they happened on the practice field, an Achilles and an ACL, I think it's fair to assume that both guys went down, right? And they go down, they have to be helped off. Like that's, you and I have been at enough practice. That's a jarring moment with one guy throughout a practice. Whoever the second was in the order of this, I can't imagine they kept practicing after the second Achilles.
That would
right?
be one of my first questions. Did practice end after the second injury? Yeah.
So once the practice ends after the second injury, whether it was the Achilles or they had to think, let's just take a deep breath, let's just get till tomorrow. And then they got to tomorrow and they just like, people are still, that had to just be a jolting moment for a lot of these guys that even just like kind of role players that have just seen a lot of their teammates go down. And the elephant in the room is like, we were supposed to boycott, right? And now we're here, and now guys are going down. And the way the NFL works, it's not like Kevin Durant. You tear an Achilles, people are still giving you the max, you still get money. Like NFL, boom, you're cut, right? Is Justin School, his career could be over. If Tavarius never is the same, like he'll never play again. So the majority of guys, Trent Williams ain't even there. But if you're like Fred Warner, you're like, God, I'm hopefully a couple months away from signing a huge extension. Like I don't want to just chase Trey Sermon to the left and have a knee go out. Mm-hmm. It's got to be rattling. So my gut says, and I don't blame them at all. Let's throw a barbecue today or something. Let's just chill.
Well,
or send them home early or do whatever.
Especially in a year where players, the Niners are one of the teams where a lot of guys showed up to voluntary camp. But like you said, there were a lot of players and certainly before it even all began, there were a lot of players who were considering not showing up. Now, ultimately, more did show up than maybe we initially thought would, or at least they led everyone to believe would, that they were going to boycott OTAs. But if you're those players, if you're one of those guys who was on the fence and decided to show up, I wonder if part of it is maybe I wasn't going to practice today anyway, right?
Now, ultimately, and you and I were talking about this before we hopped on, is let's just say hypothetically, and we don't know, by the time you listen to this tomorrow, there might be highlights. Well, I guess there won't because the media is not allowed. But let's say they don't practice again. They cancel, they just have walkthrough meetings tomorrow, and the mandatory minicamp doesn't happen. Because I would say that's on the table right now. Are you confident that practices are going to happen next week?
No.
And it's like, I
partly
wouldn't blame
because
them
they had good attendance for voluntary.
And
like
really,
you don't need to. Well, we got to wait till Trent Williams and Juice show up.
Yeah, and it feels like they've been going now pretty strong for a couple months, right? Just with the group together, like right around the draft, everyone got back together. But my thing is, eventually, and this is the hard part about the sport, is you do have to practice, right? And once you start with pads, you're going even faster. It's just the nature of the sport. Like they are going to have an injury in training camp, 1,000,000%. More than likely, a day that we're there, a guy will get, hopefully not carted off the field, but even just like a broken hand, right? Just a strained, a dude running a go route grabs a hammy. Like it's just, that happens at every camp. When I first got in the NFL, my job was to roto world and just input injuries. And it was just like, training camp was insane. It was like, God damn, it never stops. So it's going to be, is everyone going to be like, happening again when Ayuk has a hammy August 1st, right? Ultimately,
that would be the reaction, yeah.
Yeah, but it might not even be that big a deal, right? That's just football, right? Because
that specific player gets that specific injury,
but it happened to him before.
That's why I'm saying if Brandon Ayuk gets a hamstring,
but you agree it's coming. Like they're going to have an injury in training.
Well,
camp.
I mean, this is the part you can't hide from: is you're playing football. Like eventually, you cancel some practices, maybe you cancel mandatory OTAs, but eventually you got to play football, right?
Like eventually, Nick Bosa's lining up as your starting defensive end, and he can't just do it week one. That can't be his first time in pads, right? he's going to practice.
Well, did you hear? I know you heard it because you mentioned it. I don't know if you mentioned it on the podcast the other day or you mentioned it just when we were talking. Julian Edelman's appearance on Chris Long's podcast, and one of the things they talked about was the game that New England played last year on, no notice. Was that on a Tuesday or a Monday? I think it was a Tuesday, wasn't it? Or maybe it was a Wednesday in Kansas City. What was the deal on that one?
They played the weirdest game, because Cam was out and they pushed the game back. It was a weird. I remember they did a Wednesday game.
And one thing he said was we flew in day of the game.
Belichick? Yeah, that was. Remember they were like down 3 points at halftime, and he was like, "This is the greatest game Belichick's ever coached."
And Julian
it was
said,
remarkable.
But one thing Julian said is that he's like, I've never been so tight for a football game. Like I just was not prepared to play that game physically, my body. Right? There is an element. Now that's a specific short-term buildup. We're talking about a longer-term buildup.
Last year was unique with some of those weekday games.
But the point is just you can't just walk onto the field cold and start playing the sport. That's the point.
Yeah, the NFL was pretty cold-blooded last year. Like, we're getting these goddamn games in.
Blooded.
We're getting these games.
What day was that game? I feel like the game was
I think it was a Wednesday. The Chiefs played multiple Tuesdays.
Well, there was a Ravens Wednesday game, right? Last year.
Maybe that game was Monday, but it was supposed to be Thursday. Something weird happened.
It was
with
something
the Patriots.
extraordinarily weird. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know in the short term what you do about this, but I do know, under normal circumstances, I would chalk it up to these are just things that happen. This is the sport. It's luck, but you are on high alert with this team given how frequently it's happened to them.
Guy, who doesn't like a Wednesday 1:00 Chiefs Patriots or Ravens Browns at 2:00 on a Tuesday?
But like on 3 days notice, that's what I'm looking for.